The stars were dying. One by one, they guttered in the black, ancient fires, collapsing into cold embers. Their light, the memory of battles fought, of worlds born and buried, drifted across the gulf in silence, too faint to reach the hearts of men. 1,000 fortress monasteries, once proud beacons of imperial order, now hung like tombstones in the void. Some drifted dead, their vox silent. Others burned, lighting the dark with the final defiance of their garrisons. The galaxy was not at war. It was at judgment. Beyond the veil of dying suns, terror waited, wreathed in storm. The Emperor's palace stood at the center of it all, its walls like mountains of gold, its gates like the jaws of an endless beast. And upon its outermost bastion, the Eternity Gate, stood the angel. Sanguinius did not move. His white wings, vast as banners, caught the pale fire of terror's sky, stirring faintly in the poisoned wind. Below him, the void rumbled as ships moved into position, loyal and traitor alike. The black armadas of brother turned against brother. Far beyond the horizon, Baal's red sands whispered to him in memory, the scent of dry earth, the taste of dust in his throat, the voices of those long gone. But there was no turning back. Not for him, not for any of them. And before we step forward into this final hour, I will say something to you, my friend. We truly love and care for you. Yes, you, wherever you are beneath your own sky. Before we begin the story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now take a breath, hold your coffee in your hands, let the warmth ground you, because this tale is not for the faint of heart. Let us begin. The angel's eyes, pale gold, deep as the void itself, searched the skies above terror. He could see them, the storms breaking in the upper atmosphere, warp lightning tearing at the clouds. His visions were never far away, and in them he saw the end. Always the end. Horus's face twisted in pain and hate, his own blood spilling onto black stone. The Emperor's silent figure framed by fire. He closed his eyes. A shiver passed through his wings. A sound broke the stillness, the measured tread of armored boots. Rogel Dawn approached, his yellow plate dusted with ash. The Praetorian's face was carved from granite, every line of it drawn tight by the weight of command. "You've been here since dawn," Dawn said, coming to stand beside him. His voice was as steady as the walls he built. "You should rest." Sanguinius did not turn. The dawn was not worth sleeping through. His tone was soft, a faint music beneath the steel. "I will rest when the walls are broken, Rogel. Not before." Dawn's eyes lingered on him for a moment, searching for cracks in that serene mask. "Your visions," he hesitated. "They have grown worse." "They have not changed," Sanguinius replied, still watching the storm. "But they draw nearer. I see the moment, Rogel. I see Horus's face as I have seen it 1,000 times. I see what must be done. And yet you stand here," Dawn said quietly. "And yet I stand here," Sanguinius echoed. His wings shifted again, as though they felt the weight of what lay upon them. "Do you think me afraid of death? I think you afraid of what comes after." Dawn's tone was not unkind. Sanguinius finally looked at him. There was sorrow in the angel's gaze, not for himself, but for the man beside him. "You have built walls to keep the enemy out. I have built wings to carry me to them. We are both architects, Rogel, but the things we build are never meant to last." Dawn said nothing. Words were no defense here. He turned, the steel of his boots ringing on the stone, and left the angel alone again. For a long time, Sanguinius did not move. His mind walked far from the walls of terror, to the sands of Baal. He saw his legion there, the sons who bore his blood in their veins. He saw them standing proud in golden plate, their banners high, their voices joined in war song. He saw, too, the curse he had never spoken aloud to them, the black rage, the storm that would one day consume their minds. They would fight, they would die, and they would remember him only in fragments, as a figure glimpsed through the red haze of madness. Immortality was no blessing. It was the cruelest of legacies. The wind rose. The skies darkened. From far below, the sound of war horns rolled across the walls. The loyalist fleets were moving. The traitors answered, their ships breaking formation to begin the long, terrible dance of battle. Sanguinius spread his wings. For a moment, the light caught them, pure white against the black storm, the last unbroken thing in a galaxy of ruin. "My brothers," he whispered, voice carried away by the wind. It was unclear if he spoke to those who fought at his side, or to those he would soon face across the void. "I forgive you." The first shots of the battle lit the skies, turning night into a shattered dawn. Sanguinius turned from the gate, descending into the fortress where his legion waited. His golden armor caught the light of 1,000 torches. His blade, long as a man and wrought in the forges of the emperor, hung at his side. The halls were silent as he passed. Every warrior bowed his head, though none dared speak. They could feel it, as all men feel the weight of history when it draws near. In the great chamber at the heart of the bastion, Sanguinius paused. The statues of his brothers lined the walls, proud, unbroken, eternal in stone. Yet in the angel's eyes, he saw them as they truly were, shattered by war, broken by choice, bound for tragedy. He stood before Horus's likeness, the stone face untouched by treachery. For a moment, he allowed himself to remember the warmth in his brother's voice, the loyalty that had once been unshakable. "You were the brightest of us," Sanguinius murmured, "and now you are the blade that will cut us all down." The chamber was silent. The statues did not answer. Outside, the first screams of battle reached the walls. Sanguinius turned away, his wings sweeping wide. His course was set. His fate was no longer his own. The angel of blood walked into the heart of the fortress, toward the war he could not escape, and the death he had long since accepted. The walls trembled, the sky burned, and the siege of terror began. The skies of Baal were always red, red with dust, red with storm, red with the memories of blood spilled on its barren sands. Even in the rare moments of calm, the air carried the taste of iron, a constant reminder of the planet's legacy of violence. But on the day the Emperor came, the skies seemed to bleed more deeply than ever, as if the world itself knew that its destiny was about to change. The angel walked the sands alone that day. His wings were folded, not in weariness, but in quiet thought. His legion had gathered on the cliffs above, their eyes fixed on the approaching storm ship, a craft unlike any Bolite had seen. Its hull was gold, gleaming like a fragment of a forgotten sun, and its engines roared like the judgment of the gods. Sanguinius had always known this day would come. He had seen it in dreams, the golden figure who would arrive and call him away, the brotherhood that would follow, and the war that would consume the stars themselves. But knowing did not make the moment easier. When the Emperor descended, the red dust bent around him, as if even the world's storms bowed to his will. His armor was the color of eternity, his face hidden in the radiance of a god made flesh. "You are Sanguinius," the Emperor said. His voice was not a question. It was a truth, spoken as though the universe itself recognized the name. Sanguinius bowed his head, his white wings unfurling in reverence. "I am he said, his voice calm, though the air trembled with power. "And I have been waiting for you." The Emperor's eyes, dark, endless, studied him in silence. In that gaze, Sanguinius felt the weight of millennia, the unspoken knowledge of what lay ahead. Yet the Emperor smiled faintly, as though seeing not the doom, but the beauty of the moment. "You will be my son," he said, "my general, my angel." And so it was. The 9th Legion, long broken by attrition and cursed by the harsh worlds from which they were drawn, became the Blood Angels. They followed their Gene Father into the Great Crusade, their loyalty as fierce as the storms of Baal. Everywhere they went, the angels' presence brought order where there was ruin, hope where there was despair. But war is never clean, even in the hands of angels. Years passed, and the Great Crusade carved its path through the galaxy. Sanguinius became a figure of legend, his white wings blazing above battlefields, his sword a streak of gold among the black. But those who fought beside him knew the truth. His heart was not made for conquest. He mourned every life lost, imperial or otherwise. He saw beauty in the ruins, sorrow in the silence that followed victory. It was during the cleansing of Melchior that Sanguinius first fought beside Horus. The battle was fierce, the traitor warlords entrenched within the obsidian citadel of the planet's surface. Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's favoured son, led the lunar wolves at the northern gate, while Sanguinius and his blood angels descended upon the southern walls like a storm of flame and feathers. At the height of battle, when the enemy unleashed a barrage of void lances that shattered the southern assault, it was Horus who broke through to aid them. His Terminator-clad warriors crashed into the breach with a roar, and for the first time, the angels stood beside the War Master in war. "Your timing is precise as ever," Sanguinius said, cutting down a warlord with a single stroke. His voice was light, but there was a glint of gratitude in his eyes. Horus laughed, his mace spinning in his hands as he broke a squadron of enemy champions. "And your style is as excessive as always. Do you always bring wings to a siege?" "They serve their purpose," Sanguinius replied, his tone measured, though a faint smile touched his lips. It was the beginning of a friendship unlike any other. In the months that followed, the Angel and the War Master fought together on a dozen worlds. Horus's charisma was a flame, bold and unrelenting, while Sanguinius's grace was a quiet, steady light. They complemented each other, each finding in the other a brother they could trust without question. Around the fire pits of victory, they would speak not of war, but of the future. Horus spoke of the day when the Great Crusade would end, when the Emperor's dream would be complete. Sanguinius spoke less, but when he did, his words were laced with hope, hope that peace might be more than a dream. But even then, in the quiet moments, Sanguinius felt the shadow. His visions did not rest. In them, he saw Horus standing across from him, blade in hand, the stars burning around them. He never spoke of it, not then. Years passed. The bond between them deepened. Horus would laugh and call Sanguinius his dearest brother, the one he would trust with his life. And Sanguinius, though burdened by prophecy, would smile in return, knowing the truth, that trust, in time, would become the weapon that killed them both. The 9th Legion flourished under their Primarch. Worlds that feared the tread of other legions welcomed the Blood Angels, for the angel brought not only war, but beauty. His sons built monuments where others left ruins, raised spires where others left rubble. It was their way of defying the curse that lurked in their blood. a silent prayer that creation might balance destruction. And yet, Sanguinius knew the cost of every victory. On the long voyages between campaigns, he would walk alone among the galleries of his fleet, looking upon the statues of those who had fallen. The silence of the halls pressed against him like a tide. He felt the weight of their loyalty, their sacrifice, and wondered if they truly knew the price they had paid for his vision. On the eve of the triumph at Ulanor, Sanguinius stood beside Horus once more. The Emperor had named Horus War Master, and the galaxy seemed poised for a golden age. The banners flew high, the legions roared in triumph. Yet as the celebrations echoed through the night, the angels stood apart, looking out across the void from the balconies of the grand hall. "You are quiet tonight," Horus said, approaching, his ceremonial armor catching the light. "I am thinking," Sanguinius replied softly. His wings were folded close, the white feathers darkened by shadow. Horus leaned on the railing beside him. Thinking of what? Victory? Glory? Or is it that Baalite melancholy again? Sanguinius smiled faintly. "I am thinking of how fragile this all is. One fracture, one moment, and it could fall apart." Horus chuckled. "You worry too much. The Emperor trusts us. I trust you. That is enough." The angel looked at him, the shadow of his visions stirring in his mind. "I hope you are right, brother." Horus grinned, clapping a gauntleted hand to his shoulder. "When have I ever been wrong?" Sanguinius said nothing. The stars turned slowly overhead, silent witnesses to the promise they both believed in. A promise that, in the deep chambers of the angel's heart, he already knew could not last. And so, the crusade marched on. The angel's wings would carry him from victory to victory, his legion's names sung in glory across the stars. But with each triumph, the shadow at the edge of his visions grew darker. The Emperor had placed his trust in Horus, and Sanguinius, knowing what he knew, chose to stand beside him still, because to do anything else would be to betray not only his brother, but himself. It was a choice he would carry to the very end. The sky above Davin was wrong. It was not the simple wrongness of a dying sun, nor the blood-red haze of Baal. This was a wrongness that crept beneath the skin, a stillness that tasted of rot. The moon hung shrouded in clouds the color of old wounds, its air thick with whispers carried on a wind that did not stir the trees. Sanguinius stood upon the deck of the red tier, his wings folded tightly against his back. The Blood Angel's fleet orbited Davin at a cautious distance, its formation like a blade held in reserve. Across the void, the vengeful spirit loomed, Horus's flagship, proud and defiant as ever. But Sanguinius could feel the difference even from here. It was not in the steel. It was in the silence. Horus had been wounded. That much the reports had said. Wounded in a battle he should have won easily, struck by a blade that carried more than simple steel. Now he lay within the serpent lodge of the Davinite priests, refusing the medici of the legions, trusting instead to the rites of this moon. It was not like him. Sanguinius's hands tightened on the railing. He had seen Horus bleed before, but never retreat, never vanish into silence. Behind him, Captain Azkaelon approached, his crimson armor polished to a deep sheen. "My lord," he said, bowing his head. "The word-bearer's representatives request audience again. They say Horus's recovery is assured." Sanguinius turned, his golden eyes steady. "And do you believe them?" Azkaelon hesitated. "No. Nor do I." The captain's expression darkened, but he said nothing more. Sanguinius dismissed him with a nod, then turned back toward the vengeful spirit. His visions had been restless of late. shadows curling at the edge of the light, his wings heavy as if weighed down by unseen chains. He had seen Horus's face in dreams, the same face that once smiled with brotherhood, now twisted by something unspoken. And in each vision, the distance between them grew. The days passed. Horus emerged from the Serpent Lodge, healed in body, but altered. When the War Master greeted his brothers again, his voice was warm, his laughter bold, but beneath it there was an echo, a faint, hollow tone that Sanguinius could not ignore. They met in the strategium of the vengeful spirit. The chamber was vast, its hololithic displays casting pale light across the polished floor. Horus embraced Sanguinius, as he always had, wings and mace and golden plate pressing together in a bond that had once been unshakable. "My brother," Horus said, his voice rich as always. "It has been too long." Sanguinius looked at him closely. The wound was gone, but in its place, there was something else, a shadow in the eyes, a tension in the smile. "And yet, you kept us waiting," Sanguinius replied, his voice soft. "Your recovery was unusual." Horus laughed. "The Davanites are a strange people, but their loyalty is beyond question. They saved my life, Sanguinius. We should all be grateful for that." Sanguinius' wings shifted faintly. Gratitude is one thing, trust is another. For a moment, Horus's gaze hardened, the smile tightening. Then it softened again, the mask slipping back into place. "You worry too much, as always. Come, there is work to be done. The crusade waits for no one." In the months that followed, Sanguinius watched. The changes were subtle at first. Horus's decisions grew bolder, riskier, as though some unseen fire drove him. His counsels were more private, his circle of advisors narrower. The War Master's words still carried the charm that had made him beloved, but there was steel beneath them now, steel that cut deeper than before. At Ulanor's echoes, the whispers began. Word-bearers here, sons of Horus there. Strange symbols carved in places where imperial doctrine had no hold. Sanguinius did not confront him directly, not yet, but he felt the threads tightening, weaving something vast and dangerous just beyond sight. It was on the fields of Dwell that the first true crack appeared. The Dwell campaign was a brutal one, a world of stone citadels and endless storms, its defenders unyielding even before the might of the legions. Sanguinius and his blood angels had been ordered to hold the southern approaches, while Horus's forces broke the main bastion. Midway through the battle, the orders changed. Horus sent word for the blood angels to abandon their defensive line and press the assault on the enemy's central fortress, a maneuver that would draw them into a killing ground. Azkaelon came to him at once. "My lord, this is madness. Our flanks will collapse. The enemy will—" "I know," Sanguinius said quietly. He stood over the tactical display, the hololith's light painting his features in pale gold and shadow. "And yet, we will do as ordered." Azkaelon's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. The blood angels moved as commanded. The cost was high. By the day's end, the central fortress was taken, but the southern lines had been bled near to breaking. When the campaign ended, Sanguinius stood in Horus's strategium once more. "You risked my sons," he said, his voice calm but edged. His wings were folded close, his eyes fixed on the War Master. "That was not necessary." Horus leaned back in his command throne, his expression unreadable. "War is never necessary, brother. It is only inevitable. You know this better than most." Sanguinius' gaze did not falter. "We have fought side by side enough times that I know when your strategies place victory above lives. But this was different. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then Horus rose, stepping close, his shadow falling across the angel's wings. "You think I would squander your sons lightly? You wound me, Sanguinius." The angel's voice softened, but it carried the weight of his visions. "I think you are changing, and I fear where that change will lead." Horus's smile returned, but it did not reach his eyes. "You always were the cautious one. Worry not, I am still your brother." But Sanguinius felt the distance growing. In the quiet of the red tear, the angel walked alone. His visions grew darker still, Horus's laughter turning to a snarl, the skies of terror burning, the gates of the emperor's palace torn open. And in all of them, Sanguinius's own blood stained the stones. Azkaelon found him one night, standing before the viewing ports, the stars stretching endless beyond. "My lord," the captain said, his voice hesitant, "do you still trust him?" Sanguinius did not answer immediately. His golden eyes remained fixed on the void. "I trust the brother I knew," he said at last. "I am no longer certain I trust the man he is becoming." Azkaelon's hand tightened on the hilt of his blade. "If the War Master turns—" "He has not turned," Sanguinius said sharply, then softened. "Not yet, and if he does, it will not be for you or I to prevent it. The Emperor has placed his trust in Horus. We will honor that trust until there is no choice left." Azkaelon bowed his head, but his silence spoke more than words. The campaigns continued. Horus's voice carried across the legions as it always had, bold and certain. But in the shadows, the web tightened. Sanguinius felt it in every council, every glance, every silence that fell where once there had been open laughter. The angel of blood spread his wings beneath the cold stars, his course set by prophecy. He would not confront Horus now. He would not break the brotherhood yet. But in the depths of his heart, he knew. The warp storms had been restless for weeks. They whispered along the hulls of the fleets, carrying voices no vox could record. On the bridges of the Blood Angel's ships, the crew crossed themselves in silence, muttering half-remembered prayers. It was as though the void itself sensed what was coming, but refused to speak it aloud. Sanguinius stood on the command deck of the Red Tier, his wings folded close, his gaze fixed on the endless stars. To the crew, he was as calm as ever, his voice measured, his movements graceful. But within him, the visions pressed harder than ever before, the skies of terror burning, the Emperor's palace breaking, and Horus, his brother, his friend, standing on the other side of a gulf that no bridge could span. And it began, as so many things did, with whispers. At first, they were quiet things, exchanged in corridors and private chambers. Sons of Horus officers, speaking in low tones with word-bearers, their words polite, their eyes sharp. Rumors of imperial orders being questioned. Campaign strategies that bent the rules of the crusade. Azkaelon brought the reports to him, his expression hard. "They are building something," the captain said. "Plans we are not meant to see. Orders we are not meant to hear." Sanguinius listened in silence. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the tactical table, but the muscles in his jaw were tight. "And Horus?" Azkaelon hesitated. "He speaks as though nothing has changed. But he does not speak to you as often as he once did. You are not invited to his councils as you were before Davin." The angel's wings shifted faintly. "And yet, we are still brothers." Azkaelon's silence spoke more than any argument. The Blood Angels fought alongside the sons of Horus again, at the campaign of Istvan III. On the surface, it was no different from a dozen other joint operations. Two legions working in unity to bring compliance to a world resisting the Imperium's law. But beneath the surface, there was a tension no victory could ease. Horus was different. His laughter was still warm, his embrace still strong, but there was something shy behind his eyes, a sharpness that had not been there before, a weight to his words that pressed against those who heard them. They walked together on the fields after the battle, the smoke still curling from the ruins. "You fight as beautifully as ever," Horus said, glancing at the red-armored warriors gathering their dead. "The blood angels bring glory wherever they tread. And you fight as fiercely as ever," Sanguinius replied. His tone was calm, but there was no warmth in it. "And yet, there is something in you, Horus, a fire that burns differently now." Horus's smile thinned. "The galaxy changes, brother. We must change with it. You, of all of us, should understand the weight of destiny. I understand it better than you know." For a moment, their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not hostility, not yet, but a recognition. Horus knew Sanguinius saw more than he spoke. Sanguinius knew Horus walked a path he could not be turned from, and still neither drew their blade. In the months that followed, the Blood Angels were sent far from the center of the crusade. Officially, it was at the Emperor's command, to bring compliance to distant systems, to secure the flanks of the advancing fleets. Unofficially, Sanguinius felt the isolation. It was during this time that the visions shifted. No longer were they only of the end. They began to show the steps leading there. Istvan's surface burning, Terra's walls breaking, Horus' banner flying above the ruins, and always, in the heart of it, the angel's own death. One night, aboard the Red Tear, he walked alone in the Hall of Echoes, the chamber where the Blood Angels kept the statues of their fallen heroes. It was a place of silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's heart deep below. Azkaelan found him there, standing before a statue newly carved. "My lord," the captain said softly, "we are ready for the next campaign." Sanguinius did not turn. His golden eyes lingered on the statue's face. A sergeant fallen at Istvan, his likeness captured in stone, his name already fading into the long roll of the legion's dead. "Azkaelon," he said quietly, "do you know what it is to see the future and be powerless to change it?" The captain hesitated. "No, my lord, but I know what it is to fight for it, even when the odds are lost." The angel's wings shifted slightly. "And that is why I will go to Terra when the time comes. Not because I believe I can change the ending, but because I will not abandon the path, no matter where it leads." Azkaelan bowed his head, but there was no comfort in the gesture. The shadow over Terra grew heavier. News travelled slowly across the stars, but the pattern was clear. Horus's campaigns grew bolder, his authority more absolute. Loyalists began to vanish from his councils. Those who spoke against him found themselves sent to the most dangerous fronts, or never heard from again. The Emperor was silent. Whatever passed between him and the War Master was hidden from the rest of the Primarchs. But Sanguinius could feel it, the weight in the warp, the tightening threads of fate. When the summons came, it was not from Horus. It was from Rogel Dorn. The Vox channel crackled to life in the strategium of the Red Tier. Dorn's voice was as hard as the walls he built. "Sanguinius, the Emperor recalls you to Terra. There is concern." Sanguinius' wings unfolded slightly. "Concerning Horus?" Dawn hesitated, which was answer enough. The Emperor will speak with you upon your arrival. Bring your legion. The walls must hold. Sanguinius stood in silence for a moment, the words hanging in the air like the toll of a distant bell. Very well, he said at last. We will make all speed. As the channel closed, the angel turned to Azkaelon. Prepare the legion, set course for Terra. Azkaelon's expression was grim. It begins, then. Sanguinius's gaze turned toward the stars. It began long ago, my friend. We are only now catching up to it. The red tear turned its prow toward the heart of the Imperium. Behind it, the scattered fleets of the Blood Angels gathered like a storm. The warp stirred restlessly, as though the void itself knew the weight of the moment. In the quiet of his sanctum, Sanguinius knelt in meditation, his wings folded around him like a shroud, his sword resting across his knees. He saw again the visions, Horus's face, the Emperor's fall, the walls of Terra drowning in blood. And he whispered a prayer, not for victory, but for the strength to stand when the end came. And the Angel of Blood was returning to the Emperor's palace. The shadow was falling, and Terra would be the stage upon which the galaxy's fate would be written. Day was coming when the choice would be made, and the cost would be everything. The red tear descended toward Terra beneath a sky of gold. The planet gleamed below like the heart of the Imperium itself. Oceans of clouds, spires of impossible height, and the glittering cradle of the Emperor's dream. But even as Sanguinius looked upon it, he felt the shadow that clung to its light. It was not the shadow of armies or sieges, not yet. It was a quieter darkness, the kind that took root in silence, in secrets, in the halls where decisions were made without witness. The angel stood at the viewport of the flagship as it cut through the high atmosphere. The towers of the imperial palace rose beneath him, so vast they seemed like mountain ranges, each one crowned with statues of the emperor's victories. And yet, for all their grandeur, Sanguinius could see the cracks, repairs hastily made, battlements being raised, defenses strengthened. The palace was bracing itself. When he entered the inner palace, the weight of the air shifted. No mortal voice could describe the scale of its halls. Gold and marble stretched into eternity, lit by suns captured and bound in vast cages of light. Along the walls, murals told the story of the Imperium's rise, the Emperor's triumphs, the victories of his sons, the unity that had brought the galaxy to heel. But there were no new murals now. The walls had not been painted since Ulanor. The custodians led him in silence, their golden armor flawless, their faces as expressionless as statues. They did not speak. They did not need to. Sanguinius felt the urgency in every step. The doors to the Sanctum Imperialis opened without sound. The Emperor sat upon the golden throne. The sight, even for a Primarch, was overwhelming. His presence filled the air like the weight of a star, his eyes deep as eternity itself. The light of the throne cast long shadows, and the machinery that fed its power whispered with a voice like the deep hum of the void. Sanguinius bowed his head, his wings lowering in reverence. "My son," the Emperor said, his voice carrying both welcome and sorrow. "Father," Sanguinius replied softly. His voice was calm, but beneath it, the tension coiled tight. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. "You have seen it," he said at last. It was not a question. Sanguinius's golden eyes met his. "I have seen many things, Father, but in all of them, Horus stands against me." The Emperor's gaze did not waver. "Then you know why I've called you here." The silence between them was heavy. Sanguinius felt the truth in his bones. The Emperor had known for longer than any of them, perhaps even before Davin, perhaps before the War Master's fall had begun. "You still hope to turn him," Sanguinius said quietly. "I hope," the Emperor replied. "But hope is not the same as trust. Terror must be made ready." They spoke for hours in the shadow of the throne, of the palace's defenses, of the walls that must hold against a storm greater than any the Imperium had yet faced. Rogel Dawn had already begun his work, fortifying the palace with stone and steel. But the Emperor spoke to Sanguinius not only of walls, but of what lay beyond them, of the will to stand when hope was gone, of the cost that would be paid. "You will be here when he comes," the Emperor said. Sanguinius bowed his head. "If it is your will." "It is not only my will, it is your place," the Emperor replied. "You are the angel. They will follow you, even into the dark." Sanguinius felt the weight of those words settle upon him like a chain. His visions had shown him this. The walls of the palace, the banners of the blood angels, the sound of war like thunder against the gates, and his death, always his death. When he left the throne, he found Dawn waiting for him in the antechamber. Rogel Dawn was as unyielding as the walls he built. His golden armor bore the marks of long labor, his gauntlets dusted with stone. The two Primarchs clasped hands, their greeting brief but sincere. "You have come," Dawn said simply. "I have." "Good." Dawn's voice carried no warmth, but neither did it carry doubt. "We will need you." They walked together along the battlements, the air filled with the clang of work. Everywhere, servitors and laborers hauled stone, reinforced gates, raised walls higher still. "You have seen the visions," Dawn said after a time. "Yes." Dawn's jaw tightened. "Do they end with the walls holding?" Sanguinius' wings shifted faintly. "They end with me standing upon them. Beyond that, there is silence." Dawn did not press. There was no need. The blood angels made camp in the outer bastions of the palace. Their crimson banners flew high, their ranks gleaming in the sunlight of terror. But Sanguinius could feel the weight of their unspoken questions. Why here? Why now? Why were they called from the crusade when Horus still fought or claimed to fight in the Emperor's name? He gave them no false comfort. In the great assembly hall, his voice carried over them like the sound of wings in the wind. "My sons," he said, his golden eyes sweeping over the sea of red armor. "We have been called to stand at the heart of the Imperium. There are storms coming, storms greater than any we have faced. You will stand here not because it is glorious, but because it is necessary. You will stand because the walls must hold, no matter the cost." Their voices rose in answer, strong and certain. But Sanguinius heard the weight beneath them, the knowledge that a storm was coming, that no blade or shield could truly turn aside. In the quiet nights that followed, the angel walked the walls. Terror stretched out beneath him, a city of endless spires and streets, each one filled with countless lives who would never know the scale of what was coming. He thought of Horus then, of their laughter on the battlefields of the crusade, of the trust they had shared, the bond they had sworn. And he thought of the moment, soon to come, when they would stand on opposite sides of the walls. His wings stirred faintly in the night air. The palace loomed around him, vast and silent, its stones whispering with the echoes of all the wars it had seen. And Sanguinius, the angel of blood, whispered to the stars, "If you come, brother, I will be here." The news came like a wound. It did not arrive with ceremony or warning, but on the cold edge of astropathic transmissions, their words broken and frantic from the storms in the warp. Istvan, massacre, Horus. The first messages spoke of battle, the War Master calling the loyal legions to war against rebels. Then came the second wave of words, jagged and blood-soaked. The loyalists had been betrayed. The drop site had burned. Entire legions cut down by their brothers. And Horus had turned. In the war room of the Imperial Palace, the air was heavy with the silence of the unthinkable. Rogel Dawn stood as solid as the stone beneath their feet, his eyes hard, his jaw like iron. Around him, Imperial commanders whispered the names of the dead. Ferrus Manos, Vulcan lost, Corax broken, and Horus's name was on every tongue. Sanguinius stood apart from them all, his wings folded close, his golden eyes shadowed. He had felt this moment in his bones long before the first word of it had reached Terra. The betrayal was no longer a whisper. It was a truth that rang through the halls, like the tolling of a bell. Dawn turned to him at last. "You knew," he said, his voice as flat as stone. "I saw it," Sanguinius replied. His voice was soft, but it carried. But seeing and stopping are not the same. Visions do not tell you which path will lead to salvation. They only show you where the road ends. And where does it end? Sanguinius' wings shifted faintly. Here, on these walls, with blood and fire. Dawn looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Then we prepare. The weeks that followed were a blur of motion. The palace became a fortress, in truth, its walls rising higher, its gates sealed with adamantium. Every bastion was manned, every approach mapped for defense. The Legio Custodes walked the battlements beside the Blood Angels, their golden armor gleaming in the light of a sun that seemed too bright for the shadow on the horizon. Sanguinius oversaw his legion tirelessly. He walked among them as they drilled, as they repaired their armor, as they checked their weapons again and again. His presence was a steady light, but beneath it, he felt the same dread that had haunted him since Davin. Azkaelan came to him one night, finding him on a high platform overlooking the great gates. "My lord," the captain said, "the men ask if Horus will truly come here." Sanguinius's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, as if he could see through the walls and across the void to the War Master's fleets. "He will come, and he will bring the galaxy with him." Azkaelan's jaw tightened. "Then we will stand." "Yes," Sanguinius said softly, "we will stand." The reports from beyond Terra were worse with every passing day. Horus fleets moved like a storm, system after system falling under his banner. Loyalist forces scattered or were destroyed. The galaxy was breaking. Each astropathic message brought new wounds. Worlds burned, allies lost, brothers turned. Angron and Lorgar marched beside Horus now. Mortarian's fleets cut deep into the Imperium's heart. Fulgrim's silence spoke its own truth. Only Guilliman, Dawn, and the shattered remnants of the loyal legions still held the Emperor's cause. And in the center of it all, Sanguinius waited. He dreamed again. The walls of the palace burned. The sky above. Terra was black with ships. The void alive with fire. He saw Horus then, standing in the heart of the storm, his eyes no longer his own. And between them lay a bridge of blood, each step forward a choice neither could take back. In the dream, Sanguinius did not hesitate. He spread his wings and walked forward, though he knew it led to his end. When he woke, the choice still weighed on him like a stone. The blood angels trained harder still. Their crimson armor gleamed in the sunlight, their banners snapping in the wind above the walls. They knew now what they faced. Not just war, but war against their own brothers. In the great assembly before the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius spoke to them. His voice was steady, though every word felt like the tightening of a noose. "My sons," he said, his golden eyes sweeping over them. "The galaxy we fought for has changed. The brother we loved has turned his face from the light of the Emperor. Horus comes for Terra and for us. You will meet him here. You will stand upon these walls and face the storm, not for glory, not for victory, but because it is the duty we were made for." Their voices rose as one, a roar of loyalty that filled the air. Sanguinius heard in it not just their courage, but their understanding. They knew the cost. They would pay it. In the quiet hours of the night, he walked the battlements alone. Terror lay silent beneath him, its countless lights like stars on the surface of the world. He thought of Horus then, as he had been, the brother who had laughed with him, the friend who had stood at Ulanor, their hands clasped in triumph. And he thought of what Horus had become. Sanguinius spread his wings beneath the starlit sky. The air was still, the walls were strong, and yet the shadow pressed closer. The angel of blood whispered to the night, "If you come, brother, I will meet you here. I will stand, and if I fall, I will fall facing you." The void beyond Terra was no longer empty. It carried the tremor of approaching war. Faint at first, like the echo of a drumbeat in a far-off valley. But each day, the sound grew louder. Astropathic transmissions told the story in pieces. A fleet of black and green, the colors of the sons of Horus. A tide of crimson and brass, Angron's world-eaters. The dark ships of the word-bearers. The plague fleets of Mortarion. The shimmering, cursed vessels of Fulgrim's emperor's children. The traitor armada was moving, slow but unstoppable, like a great shadow cast across the stars. On Terra, the air grew heavy. Rogel Dawn stood atop the walls of the Imperial Palace, his gaze fixed on the distant void. The work of months had forged the palace into a fortress without equal, its gates layered in adamantium, its towers bristling with weapons, its walls thick enough to defy the storms of the warp itself. And yet, he knew the walls were not what would decide the war. It would be the will of those who stood on them. Beside him, Sanguinius stepped forward, his white wings stirring in the high winds. His golden eyes followed the line of the horizon as though he could see beyond the stars. "They are coming," the angel said softly. Dawn's jaw tightened. "Good. I am ready for them." Sanguinius looked at him, a faint shadow in his gaze. "Walls do not fear, Rogel, but the men upon them do, and fear is already here." Dawn's expression did not change. "Then it will be your task to take it from them." The blood angels drilled relentlessly in the outer bastions. Their crimson ranks marched beneath banners that caught the sunlight, their weapons honed to perfection. Each man knew what was coming, though few spoke of it aloud. As Caelon reported to Sanguinius daily, his tone steady but grim. "The men are ready, my lord," he said one evening as they walked the high parapets. "They will hold as long as breath remains in their bodies." Sanguinius' wings shifted in the cold wind. "It will take more than breath, as Caelon. It will take everything." The captain nodded once. There was nothing more to say. In the days before the enemy's arrival, the palace became a living thing. Mechanicum Magi oversaw the activation of the void shields that crowned the towers. Titans from the Legio Ignatum took their places within the walls, their engines rumbling like the heartbeat of some slumbering god. The skies were thick with the roar of thunderhawks and the shriek of stormbirds. The custodes moved like golden phantoms along the battlements, their presence a silent promise. And above it all, the banners of the Emperor and his loyal sons flew in the wind. Still, Sanguinius felt the shadow growing. At night, he walked the walls alone. The lights of terror spread out beneath him like a sea of stars, each one a life that would soon be touched by the war. He thought of the countless souls who would never see the enemy, but whose fates would be decided here on these walls. He thought of Horus. He had not dreamed of his brother in weeks, not as he once had, laughing, proud, the war master who had stood beside him. Now, in his visions, Horus came only as the shadow on the horizon, the storm at the gates. And still, Sanguinius felt no hatred, only sorrow. The first enemy scouts arrived in the Sol system weeks before the full fleet. Sleek ships marked with the eye of Horus, probing the defenses, testing the response. They were destroyed swiftly, their wreckage burning in the void. But their presence was a promise. The real storm was close. In the strategium of the Imperial Palace, Sanguinius stood with Dawn, Malcador the Sigillite, and the assembled commanders of Terra's defense. The hololithic table displayed the Sol system, its outer worlds marked in red as the traitor fleets moved closer. They will strike the outer defenses first, Dawn said, his gauntleted hand gesturing to the ring of stations and bastions that guarded Terra. Every moment they are delayed, there buys time for the walls to be ready. They will be ready, Sanguinius said quietly. His golden eyes moved across the map, already seeing the inevitable path. But the walls will not keep Horus out forever. He will come here, to the palace. That is where this will end. Malcador's gaze flickered toward him, ancient and unreadable. And when it ends, my Lord Angel, what then? Sanguinius' wings stirred faintly. Then it ends as it must. The days stretched long, each one carrying the weight of waiting. The blood angels took their posts on the outer walls, their crimson armor a stark contrast to the gold of the custodes and the black and yellow of the imperial fists. In the great halls of the palace, Sanguinius spoke to his sons, his voice carrying over them like the steady beat of wings. You will see things upon these walls you thought impossible, he told them. You will see your brothers come against you. You will see the sky burn and the earth break beneath your feet. But you will not falter. You are the blood angels. You will hold until the last. They answered as one, their voices filling the hall. But beneath their roar, Sanguinius felt the same quiet dread that sat in his own heart. On the final night before the enemy arrived, the palace lay silent beneath the stars. Sanguinius stood alone upon the highest battlement of the Eternity Gate, his white wings spread wide, the wind pulling at his hair. The city of Terra lay dark below, its countless lives unaware of how close the storm had come. He looked toward the stars, and for a moment he thought he saw it, a shadow upon the void, vast and endless. The shape of Horus's fleet, still distant, but close enough that the air itself seemed to tremble. The angel of blood closed his eyes, and in the silence he whispered to the brother he had once loved. Come then, Horus. The walls are ready. I am ready. If this is the path you have chosen, I will meet you at its end. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 8, 1,200 to 1,500 words? where the first wave of Horus's fleet strikes the outer defenses of the Sol system, and Sanguinius stands ready as the siege of Terra truly begins. This will be the opening blows of the greatest battle in Imperial history. Chapter 8. Complete Liko. Word count Poradena. All right, I will now write. Chapter 8 in full. 1,200 to 1,500 words. This chapter will show the first clash of Horus's fleets at the edge of the Sol system. The outer defences burning, loyalist fleets making their desperate stand, and Sanguinius watching as the storm draws closer, knowing it is only the beginning. The Sol system shuddered as the first shadow of the War Master fell upon it. The outer defences, ring upon ring of stations, bastions and fleets, faced the horizon of black ships that now filled the void. At the edge of sight, the traitor fleet appeared, not as a scattered line, but as a single tide. Sons of Horus battleships cut through the dark like blades, their hulls marked with the eye. The crimson storm of the World Eaters followed, engines burning like coals. Word-bearer warships drifted like carrion birds, their hulls etched with scripture in languages older than humanity. And in the distance, vast plague-ridden vessels slid silently forward, the Death Guard's corruption spreading even through the void. It was not an army. It was an executioner's blade. On the Red Tear, the Blood Angel's flagship, the crew watched the Auspex screens in silence. The markers of the traitor fleet swelled with each passing hour. Azkaelan stood beside Sanguinius on the command deck. The outer stations report contact, the captain said quietly. The first exchange of fire has begun. Sanguinius' golden eyes were fixed on the star map, where red symbols bloomed like wounds. And the stations will hold as long as they can, he said softly. They were not built to survive. They were built to delay. Azkaelan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Both of them knew the truth. The walls of the palace would decide the war, but every bastion that fell before it was another step toward the inevitable siege. At Pluto's orbit, the loyalist fleet made its stand. The ring fortresses, ancient engines of war, came alive with the light of thousands of guns. Torpedoes screamed through the void. Nova cannons roared. The black tide of the traitors met them head-on, the void between them igniting in fire brighter than any sun. For hours the battle burned. Titans of steel and adamantium tore each other apart in silence, their destruction lighting the dark like falling stars. But the traitor fleet was endless. One by one, the outer bastions fell. Their guns fell silent. Their lights winked out. The last transmissions from Pluto's defenses were garbled by static, the voices of dying men calling Terra's name as the void swallowed them. In the strategium of the Imperial Palace, the reports came like hammer blows. The phalanx is holding position in Mars orbit, Dawn said, his voice flat as stone. But the outer rings are gone. Sanguinius stood beside him, silent, his wings casting long shadows against the light of the hololithic map. He could feel the shadow creeping closer, the air in the chamber heavy with the weight of what was coming. Dawn looked to him at last. Your sons are ready. They are ready, Sanguinius said quietly. They have been ready since the day they landed on these walls. The traitor fleet pushed deeper into the Sol system. Saturn's defenses fired until their magazines ran dry, their orbital platforms breaking apart under the weight of enemy fire. Loyalist ships fought to the last, their wreckage burning across the void. At Jupiter, the moons became battlefields. Ganymede's surface cracked beneath the fury of orbital bombardment. Io burned in a chain of detonations that lit the gas giant's clouds in crimson fire. Every hour bought by the outer worlds was bought in blood. In the quiet of his chambers, Sanguinius stood before the great windows overlooking the palace. Terror lay spread below him, serene beneath the pale light of dawn. It looked untouched, but the angel knew better. Every battle in the void above brought the storm closer. Azkaelon entered quietly. "My lord," he said, "the last of the Saturn fleet has been destroyed. The enemy will be at Mars within days." Sanguinius turned, his expression calm, though his golden eyes were shadowed. "Then we will be ready to meet them when they come." On Mars, the Mechanicum civil war had left the forges divided. Some magi had sworn loyalty to Terra, others to Horus. When the traitor fleet entered the orbit of the Red Planet, the skies above Mars ignited as the divided forge worlds turned their weapons on one another. Great engines of war strode across the surface, titans clashing in battles that shook the planet to its core. Orbital weapons fired without pause, their beams carving through the void. For 3 days, Mars burned. When the smoke cleared, the forges loyal to Terra lay in ruin, but they had taken many of the traitors with them. The way to Terra was open. In the palace, the alarms rang. The outer defenses were gone. Mars was silent. The enemy was coming. Dawn stood in the great hall, his voice carrying over the commanders gathered before him. "The walls are complete. The gates are sealed. Every bastion is manned. Now the waiting is over." Sanguinius stepped forward, his wings unfolding, the light catching on the white feathers. His golden eyes swept over the assembled warriors. Custodes, imperial fists, blood angels, and mortal soldiers who would stand on the walls beside them. "Horus comes for us," he said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the hall. "He comes not as the brother we loved, but as the enemy we must face. You will hold these walls. You will hold them until there is nothing left to hold. And if we fall, we will fall, knowing that we stood to the end." That night, the angel walked alone on the highest battlements of the Eternity Gate. The air was cold, the wind carrying the faint hum of the void shields above. Far above the horizon, faint shapes glimmered in the dark. They were not yet close enough to see clearly, but Sanguinius knew them. The War Master's fleet had entered the orbit of Terra's outer moons. The siege had begun. The skies above Terra darkened. It was not the coming of night, but the shadow of ships. The traitor fleet had arrived in force. Horus' armada stretched across the heavens, vast enough to blot out the stars. Battle barges and cruisers of the sons of Horus led the way, their hulls black and marked with the eye. Behind them came the tide of red, green, and iron. The World Eaters, the Death Guard, the Iron Warriors. Word-bearer vessels drifted at the edges, their hulls alive with chanting voxcasters that poured scripture into the void. It was not a blockade. It was a storm given form. From the walls of the imperial palace, Sanguinius stood in silence as the shadow grew. His golden eyes watched the enemy fleet take position, each ship sliding into orbit like a blade drawn from its sheath. His wings caught the wind, their white feathers gleaming against the darkening sky. Azkaelon stood at his side, tension in every line of his posture. "They are forming bombardment lines," the captain said. "They will test the walls before they come for the gates," Sanguinius replied softly. Rogel Dorn's voice cut in over the vox. "All shield arrays at full power. Prepare to receive fire." The first bombardment began as a whisper. The sons of Horus opened fire with measured precision. their guns thundering in the void. The shells and energy beams streaked toward Terra, striking the outer void shields in bursts of light that lit the skies above the palace. The shields held, then the World Eaters joined in, their bombardment less precise, but far more furious. Waves of fire poured down, battering the shields until they flared white-hot. The air above the palace shimmered as if the very sky was aflame. Through it all, the void shields did not break. In the command bastion, Dawn's voice remained steady. Shields holding at 89%. Continue fire suppression. Sanguinius listened in silence, his gaze fixed on the distant enemy. The shields would hold for now, but the bombardment was not meant to break them outright. It was meant to test the defenses, to find the weak points, to force the defenders to bleed resources long before the true assault began. And Horus was patient. For 3 days, the bombardment continued. Each hour, the traitor fleets shifted positions, their fire falling on different bastions and walls. The skies above Terra were never dark. They burned with the light of incoming fire and the answering glare of the void shields. The defenders worked without pause. The Mechanicum labored to maintain the shield arrays, their chants echoing in the maintenance halls. The Imperial fists moved across the walls, reinforcing battered sections, sealing breaches before they could widen. The Blood Angels stood ready, their crimson armor gleaming in the glare of fire from above. On the second night, Sanguinius walked the walls. His wings caught the glow of the shields, their light turning white feathers gold. The roar of the bombardment was constant, but he heard beyond it. The rhythm of his legions breathing, the steady heartbeat of the defenders. He stopped at the gate bastion where Azkaelon waited. The men are restless, the captain admitted. They stand ready to fight, but there is no enemy on the ground. Only fire from above. They will come soon enough, Sanguinius said quietly. Horus will not let the walls stand untested forever. When he comes, they will have their fight. Azkaelon hesitated. And when he comes, my lord, will you face him? Sanguinius's golden eyes turned toward the distant dark, where Horus's flagship waited. Yes, I will face him. That is the path that has been set. John, by the 4th day, the bombardment changed. The traitor guns grew quieter, the pattern of fire shifting. Dawn stood in the strategium, eyes narrowing as he studied the incoming data. They are preparing for ground assault, he said at last. Across the walls, orders went out. The defenders moved to their positions. Weapons were primed, gates reinforced. The air above the palace shimmered with heat as the void shields absorbed the last of the heavy fire. Sanguinius took his place atop the Eternity Gate. The vast doors towered behind him, sealed with adamantium, their surface carved with the symbols of the Emperor's triumphs. Beneath them, the Blood Angels stood in perfect formation, crimson banners snapping in the wind. The angel looked out over the plains before the palace. They were empty now, but soon they would be filled with the armies of Horus. The earth itself would shake beneath the tread of traitor titans. The sky would burn with the fire of drop pods and gunships. He felt the wind catch his wings, carrying with it the scent of ozone from the charged shields above. His golden eyes did not waver. In the quiet moments before the first landfall, Azkaelon approached. "My lord," he said softly, "the men look to you. They see you standing here, and they believe the walls cannot fall while you remain." Sanguinius looked at him, a faint shadow of sorrow in his gaze. "Then I will stand here as long as I must, until the last." He turned his eyes back to the horizon. where the first streaks of fire cut through the atmosphere, drop pods burning through Terra's skies. The siege of Terra had truly begun. The skies above Terra split open. Where once the bombardment had been fire from afar, now the fire fell to earth. The first waves came screaming down through the void, drop pods by the thousands, their hulls burning red as they tore through the atmosphere. The air shook with their passage, each one a spear aimed at the walls of the Imperial Palace. Behind them came the gunships, stormbirds and thunderhawks painted in the colors of traitor legions. The green and black of the sons of Horus, the crimson of the World Eaters, the iron grey of Perturabo's iron warriors. The plain before the palace, empty for so long, erupted in fire and thunder. On the walls of the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius stood unmoving, his white wings spread wide, his golden eyes fixed on the falling storm. All batteries, Dawn's voice rang over the Vox, open fire. The skies came alive. The palace's guns roared in unison, the sound echoing across the walls like the voice of some great machine god. Bolter shells, lass fire, and missiles streaked upward to meet the falling pods. In the distance, bright flowers of flame blossomed as enemy drop pods were torn apart mid-descent. Others struck the plane intact, their hatches blasting open to unleash the traitor Astartes within. The first to land were the World Eaters. They came roaring from their drop pods, like beasts unleashed, chain axes shrieking, their white and blue armor now painted with the crimson of their endless slaughter. They charged the outer bastions without hesitation, their war cries echoing across the plain. The guns of the palace cut them down in waves, but still they came on, heedless of their own losses. Behind them, the sons of Horus advanced in disciplined formations, their bolters spitting fire as they moved. The earth shook beneath the tread of traitor dreadnoughts and the massive footsteps of titans striding toward the walls. Sanguinius raised his hand, signaling his own warriors. The blood angels moved into position along the wall, their bolters aimed downward, their crimson armor gleaming in the smoke and fire. When the World Eaters reached the killing ground, the angel's voice rang out clear. Fire! The walls erupted in light. The blood angel's bolters spoke as one, the storm of shells tearing into the charging enemy. Dozens of traitor marines fell in seconds, their armor cracked and burning. But still, the traitors came. Azkaelon stood at Sanguinius's side, directing fire, his voice steady despite the chaos below. They're focusing on Bastion 12, my lord. If they breach, they will not breach, Sanguinius said. His wings spread wide, his golden eyes narrowing. Not while I stand. The battle raged for hours. The plain before the palace became a sea of fire and blood. Every time the traitors surged forward, the walls answered with a storm of gunfire. Every breach was sealed with the bodies of the dead. The Iron Warriors brought siege engines forward, massive, brutal machines designed to tear walls apart. Their guns thundered, slamming into the void shields, sending flares of light across the sky. Each impact was a reminder that the walls, for all their strength, were not unbreakable. At the height of the fighting, a Vox officer called out, "Enemy armor advancing toward the southern bastions." Sanguinius turned his gaze south. Through the haze of fire, he could see the shape of traitor land raiders and predators pushing forward, supported by the relentless infantry of the sons of Horus. Azkaelon, Sanguinius said, his voice calm despite the roar of battle. Hold the Eternity Gate. I will reinforce the southern wall. Without another word, the angel leapt from the wall. The wind tore at his wings as he descended, his white feathers trailing streaks of gold in the smoke-filled air. He struck the killing ground with the force of a thunderbolt, his blade already in hand. The traitors faltered for a heartbeat as the Angel of Blood stood before them, his armor gleaming, his wings spread wide. Then he struck. His blade moved like light, each stroke cutting down another traitor. Sons of Horus fell before him, their advance broken beneath the fury of his assault. The air was thick with the roar of bolters and the hiss of lass fire, but nothing could stand before the angel. Behind him, the defenders rallied, their voices rising in a roar as they drove the traitors back from the wall. On the battlements above, Azkaelan watched the battle unfold, his voice cutting through the vox. Reinforce the southern wall, the angel holds the line. Everywhere along the palace, the loyalists fought with renewed strength. The sight of Sanguinius in battle, his wings bright against the smoke, his blade carving a path through the enemy, was a light in the shadow of the siege. By nightfall, the first assault had been broken. The plain before the palace was littered with the wreckage of drop pods and the bodies of the fallen. The traitor forces withdrew, dragging their wounded back toward their lines. The walls of the palace still stood. The gates were unbroken, but Sanguinius knew this was only the beginning. Horus had tested the defenses. The next assault would be worse. As the fires burned low, the angel walked the battlements once more. His wings were streaked with ash, his armor dented, but his golden eyes still burned with resolve. Azkaelan approached, saluting. "The men are ready for the next attack, my lord. They will not falter." "They will have no choice," Sanguinius said quietly. "The storm is only beginning." He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the enemy fleet still hung in the void, like a dark crown. Somewhere among those countless ships, Horus waited, and the angel knew their meeting was drawing closer. The night after the first assault brought no peace. The plain before the palace still smoked from the day's slaughter, the wreckage of drop pods and armor strewn like broken bones. The air was thick with ash, the smell of promethium and blood heavy on the wind. But in the darkness, new fires glimmered on the horizon. The enemy was moving. From the battlements of the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius watched the traitor lines come alive. Shadows shifted in the dark, shapes vast enough to blot out the faint starlight. Titans. Azkaelan approached quietly. "My lord, the scouts confirm multiple god engines, iron warriors and traitor legios." Sanguinius' golden eyes narrowed. "Then Horus means to tear down the walls this time." The dawn broke with the sound of engines. The traitor titans strode forward, their massive frames shaking the earth. Their weapons were aimed not at the defenders, but at the walls themselves. Behind them came ranks of artillery, earthshaker cannons, siege mortars, and the immense guns of the Iron Warriors' war machines. Above, the sky darkened again, with the shapes of dropships and gunships. The bombardment resumed, heavier than before, shells slamming into the void shields until they flared and rippled like water under strain. In the strategium, Dawn's voice was like stone. "The southern wall will take the brunt, all available fire to counter the Titans. Sanguinius, hold the Eternity Gate. If it falls, Terra falls." The angel inclined his head, his white wings catching the light from the hololithic displays. "The gate will hold," he said softly. Dawn's gaze lingered on him for a moment, but there was no time for more. The walls were already shaking beneath the enemy's fire. The second assault began with the roar of Titan's guns. The traitor god engines fired in unison, their weapons tearing into the void shields with force that shook the ground beneath the palace. Each impact sent arcs of energy racing across the sky, the light searing the eyes of those who watched from the walls. The Iron Warriors' siege guns joined in, their fire pounding relentlessly at a single section of wall. The stone and adamantium groaned under the strain, cracks beginning to form. Sanguinius stood atop the Eternity Gate, his golden eyes fixed on the advancing Titans. "Fire all batteries!" he commanded. The palace's guns roared to life, the combined fire of hundreds of batteries slamming into the enemy engines. Lascannon's seared armor, missile salvos detonated across their massive frames. But the Titans advanced undeterred, their void shields absorbing the punishment. Then the demons came. From the smoke and fire of the traitor lines, shapes emerged, towering, twisted forms of warp spawn, their bodies wreathed in unnatural flame. Word-bearer sorcerers chanted at their feet, their voices rising in dark hymns that carried even over the thunder of battle. The demons surged toward the walls, their claws tearing at the air, their voices a chorus of shrieks and whispers that clawed at the minds of the defenders. On the walls, mortal soldiers faltered. Sanguinius spread his wings wide, his voice cutting through the fear. "Hold your ground, you are the walls of terror." The blood angels roared in answer, their bolters unleashing a storm of fire into the advancing demons. But for every creature cut down, more emerged from the smoke. Azkaelan shouted over the Stugid din, "My lord, the southern bastion's shield array is failing." Sanguinius' gaze swept south, where the traitor Titan's fire was concentrated. The void shields flickered, their light dimming. In the strategium, Dawn's voice came harsh over the vox. "Sanguinius, reinforce the southern bastion. I will send reserves to the gate." Without hesitation, the angel leapt from the wall, his wings carrying him toward the failing bastion. The wind tore at him, the roar of battle rising with every beat of his wings. He landed amidst the defenders as the void shield failed entirely, its light collapsing in a crackle of energy. The wall was now bare before the Titan's guns. The first shot struck like the fist of a god. Stone and adamantium shattered, a section of the bastion collapsing in a storm of dust and debris. Traitor Astartes surged forward, their war cries echoing across the breach. Sanguinius met them head-on. His blade was a blur of gold, each stroke cutting down another foe. He moved with the grace of an angel, his wings trailing light and shadow. Traitor marines fell before him, their advance breaking against the fury of his assault. The defenders rallied to his side, their fear burned away in the light of his presence. Above, the traitor Titans advanced, their guns hammering at the breach. Sanguinius' golden eyes turned upward, gauging the distance. He opened the vox. "Dawn, if those Titans are not stopped, this wall will fall." "I am aware," Dawn's voice replied, grim as ever. "Hold the breach. My artillery will target their flanks." For hours, the battle raged. The breach held, but only just. The angel fought without pause, his blade flashing in the dust and smoke. Around him, blood angels and imperial fists stood shoulder to shoulder, holding back the tide. At last, as the sun dipped low, the traitor guns fell silent. The Titans withdrew, their void shields still flickering but intact. The demonic tide ebbed, the warp spawn vanishing into smoke. The second assault had ended. As night fell, the walls still stood. But the southern bastion was cracked, its defenses weakened. The defenders were bloodied, their strength tested to its limits. On the walls of the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius stood beside Azkaelon, his armor dented, his wings streaked with ash. "The next assault will be worse," Azkaelon said quietly. "Yes," Sanguinius replied, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon where the traitor lines burned. "And it will not stop until Horus himself stands at these gates." Would you like me to continue with Chapter 12, 1,200 to 1,500 words, where the third and most devastating phase of the siege begins? Traitor forces breach the outer defenses, the palace walls quake, and Sanguinius prepares for the coming of the War Master himself. This will bring the siege to the brink of its climax. Chapter Bara, complete Liko. Word count Poradena. All right, I will now write Chapter 12 in full, 1,200 to 1,500 words. This chapter will cover the third and most devastating phase of the siege so far. The traitor forces breaking the outer bastions, the walls quaking, and Sanguinius preparing as the final approach of Horus draws nearer. The third dawn of the siege rose over Terra in fire. The plain before the Imperial Palace was no longer a battlefield, it was a wasteland. Craters pocked the earth. The wreckage of drop pods and titans lay like broken monuments. The air shimmered with heat, the smoke of endless bombardment clinging to the walls like a shroud. But from the haze, the enemy came again. This time there was no pause, no probing strike. It was the full weight of Horus's fury. The traitor legions massed for an assault that would break the outer defenses and bring the War Master to the very gates of the Emperor's throne. On the walls of the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius stood as the horns of war sounded from the traitor lines. His white wings caught the light of the burning horizon, his golden eyes fixed on the tide approaching. Azkaelon stepped to his side. "The southern bastion will not hold another strike. The Iron Warriors have brought fresh engines, and the sons of Horus are massing at the western curtain wall." Sanguinius's gaze did not waver. "They will not break us, not yet." The first blow fell at dawn. The Titans came again, their massive weapons roaring, each shot hammering into the already weakened bastions. The southern wall groaned under the impact, stones shattering, smoke pouring from the cracks. Behind the Titans came the traitor infantry in vast waves, sons of Horus, World Eaters, Iron Warriors, and Death Guard, each legion bringing its own form of death. The skies above darkened once more as drop pods and assault craft poured down. The bombardment was unrelenting. In the Strategium, Dawn's voice cut over the vox. "The outer bastions will not hold. All units fall back to the inner curtain walls. Delay them, make them bleed, but preserve your strength." Sanguinius heard the words and knew what they meant. The enemy would breach the outer defenses this day. At the southern bastion, the void shields failed. The light collapsed in a shimmer of energy, and the Titan's guns tore into the wall. The breach opened with a sound like the breaking of the world, stone and adamantium collapsing in a storm of debris. The traitor Astartes surged forward. Sanguinius leapt from the wall, his wings carrying him toward the breach. The wind tore at him as he descended, the roar of the Titan's guns filling his ears. He struck the ground amidst the defenders, his blade already in motion. The first rank of traitor marines fell beneath his strike, their armor splitting in flashes of gold and blood. The Ida angel's voice rang clear over the din of battle. "Hold! Hold the line!" For a time, the breach held, The Blood Angels fought with unmatched fury, their crimson armor burning against the smoke. The Imperial fists stood beside them, their shields locked, their lines unbroken despite the storm. But the enemy's numbers were endless. Each wave cut down was replaced by another. The Titans' guns fired without pause, each strike shaking the ground beneath the defenders' feet. On the western wall, the sons of Horus struck. Their assault craft disgorged squads of Terminators and assault marines directly onto the ramparts. The defenders met them in brutal close combat, bolters roaring, chainswords biting into ceramite. Azkaelon led a counterattack, his blade carving through the traitors as he rallied the defenders. "For the Angel!" he cried, his voice cutting through the chaos. By midday, the outer bastions were aflame. The southern breach had become a killing ground, the earth soaked with blood. The western wall burned, its battlements choked with the bodies of the dead. The air was filled with the roar of engines, the thunder of guns, and the screams of the dying. Sanguinius fought without pause, his golden eyes blazing, his wings blackened with soot. Around him, the defenders stood their ground, but every moment cost them more blood. As the sun dipped low, the horns of the traitor legions sounded again. A massive detonation rocked the southern bastion, as the Iron Warriors' siege engines tore another section of wall apart. Dawn's voice came over the Vox, hard and unyielding. "Fall back to the inner walls. The outer defenses are lost." The words struck like a blade. Sanguinius turned his eyes to the horizon. The outer bastions were gone, reduced to rubble and smoke. The plain before the inner walls was choked with the wreckage of war, but the inner walls still stood. He opened the Vox. "All Blood Angels, withdraw in good order. We will hold the Eternity Gate until the last. Horus will not pass, while I still draw breath." As night fell, the defenders retreated behind the inner walls. The gates of the Eternity Gate closed once more, sealing with the thunder of adamantium locks. On the walls, the angel stood in silence, his wings catching the dying light of the burning horizon. Azkaelon came to his side, his armor battered, his voice low. "The outer bastions are gone. The enemy will be at these gates within days." Sanguinius's golden eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Then we will meet them here, and when Horus comes, I will be waiting." The fourth dawn of the siege rose not with light, but with shadow. The plain before the Imperial Palace was black with the mass of traitor forces. Sons of Horus in their sea-green armor formed the vanguard, their banners snapping in the ashen wind. World-eaters stood, beside them chain axes howling, their armor caked in blood both old and new. Behind them came the Iron Warriors with their siege engines, the Death Guard in their relentless ranks, and the word-bearers chanting their dark hymns. Above it all, the banners of Horus swayed like the heralds of doom. The enemy had come for the Eternity Gate. From the walls of the gate, Sanguinius watched the gathering storm. His white wings spread behind him, their edges catching the firelight of the burning plain. His golden eyes swept over the massed enemy, but his face remained calm. Azkaelon stood at his side, his armor scarred, his voice low. "This is the last push, my lord. If the gate falls, it will not fall," Sanguinius said, his tone like tempered steel. "Not while we still stand." The traitor guns opened fire. The Titans stepped forward, their massive weapons thundering as they pounded the gate's shields. Each strike lit the sky with arcs of energy, the void shields straining under the relentless barrage. Siege mortars roared, their shells slamming into the walls, shaking the stone beneath the defenders' feet. The noise was constant, a storm without end. Dawn's voice came over the vox, steady and unyielding. All units, prepare for ground assault. They will strike in force, hold the gate at all costs. On the walls, the defenders moved to their positions. Blood angels and imperial fists stood shoulder to shoulder, their bolters ready. Mortals of the imperial army manned the gun emplacements, their faces pale but resolute. The gate loomed behind them, its vast doors sealed, its surface carved with the victories of the Emperor. The first wave came at mid-morning. World Eater's drop pods slammed into the killing ground before the gate, their hatches blasting open. The berserkers poured out, their chain axes shrieking, their war cries echoing off the walls. Behind them came the sons of Horus, advancing in disciplined ranks, their bolters spitting fire. The defenders opened fire as one. Bolter shells tore into the charging enemy. Lass fire seared through armor. Heavy weapons turned traitor dreadnoughts into burning wrecks. The killing ground became a furnace of smoke and flame. But still, the traitors came on. From above, the Titans' guns pounded the gate. The void shields flared with every impact, their light dimming as the enemy focused their fire. Each strike brought a groan from the walls, dust falling from the stone. On the battlements, Azkaelon shouted over the din. "Shields at 60%, my lord." "They will hold," Sanguinius said, though his eyes narrowed. The second wave came before the first had fallen. Iron Warriors' siege engines rolled forward, their massive cannons unleashing a storm of fire. The ground shook as massive shells slammed into the gate, chipping away at the adamantium and stone. Sons of Horus Terminators advanced under the cover of the barrage, their storm bolters roaring as they reached the base of the wall. Hooks and grav clamps bit into the stone. The traitors began to climb. Sanguinius stepped forward. The angel leapt from the wall, his wings catching the wind, carrying him down into the heart of the battle. He struck the ground with the force of a thunderbolt, his blade already in motion. The sons of Horus faltered as he landed before them, his white wings bright against the smoke, his sword cutting through their ranks in arcs of golden light. The ground ran red as the angel carved a path through the enemy, his every movement a blur of grace and death. On the walls above, Azkaelon led the blood angels in holding the line. Bolters roared, chainswords bit, the defenders driving back the traitors who reached the ramparts. The fighting was brutal, the air thick with smoke and the stench of blood. Through it all, the gate still stood. By midday, the battle had become a storm. The Titans' guns had brought the void shields to their knees, the light flickering with each impact. The walls trembled under the constant barrage. The killing ground was a sea of bodies, loyalist and traitor alike. But the defenders did not break. As the sun dipped low, the horns of the traitor legions sounded once more. A massive detonation shook the walls as the Iron Warriors unleashed their heaviest weapons. The gate shuddered, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Dawn's voice came over the vox, grim as ever. "Sanguinius, the gate cannot hold much longer." The angel stood at the base of the wall, his armor streaked with blood and ash, his wings heavy with soot. He looked up at the vast doors above him. "Then we hold until it falls," he said softly. Night fell, with the battle still raging. The traitors withdrew for the moment, their dead littering the plain. But the defenders knew it was only a pause. The gate still stood, but it bore the scars of the day's assault. On the battlements, Sanguinius looked out over the burning horizon. Somewhere beyond that fire, Horus waited. Azkaelon approached quietly. "The next time they strike, my lord, It may be Horus himself. Sanguinius's golden eyes did not waver. Then let him come. The Eternity Gate was silent. The thunder of war, the clash of steel, the roar of engines, all had faded, as though the battle itself held its breath. High above Terra, aboard the vengeful spirit, the final act had been played. The duel was over. The angel's wings lay still. The word spread like a wound through the ranks of the defenders. First in whispers among the blood angels, who felt it in their very souls. A weight, sudden and crushing, as though the air itself had grown heavy. Then, in sharp bursts of vox traffic across the Imperial lines, the truth, spoken in clipped, grim words. The angel is fallen. On the walls of the Eternity Gate, Azkaelon felt it like a blade through his heart. His gauntleted hands clenched the stone, his golden helm tilting low. All around him, the blood angels grew still, their rage turned to a silence deeper than grief. In the strategium, Dawn's face was as unyielding as ever, but there was a shadow in his voice. The Emperor will finish what Sanguinius began. No one spoke the truth aloud, that the cost had been too high already. The battle still raged outside the gate, the traitor forces striking like wounded beasts. Yet something had shifted in the air. The roar of their assault lacked the fervor it had held before. Somewhere in the depths of the vengeful spirit, the Emperor faced Horus, and the endgame of the heresy was at hand. The defenders of Terra fought on, their grief sharpening into something harder. The blood angels in particular moved as if possessed, their strikes precise and merciless. Every blow was a tribute to their fallen Primarch. On the walls, Azkaelon's voice rang out, steady despite the ache in his chest. For the angel, for Terra. The cry rose across the ramparts, echoing over the battlefield. Bolters roared anew, Lescannons seared through enemy armor, and the defenders hurled the traitor forces back from the gate once more. But even as they fought, the cost of the victory pressed close like a shadow. As the battle ground toward its end, the skies over Terra changed. Where once the air had been filled with fire and ash, now a strange stillness came. The traitor forces faltered, their lines breaking. Vox reports came in confused bursts. Horus was dead, slain by the Emperor. The War Master's fleet was breaking, the traitor legions in disarray. The siege was over. The news brought no joy. The walls of the Imperial Palace stood, but at a terrible cost. The Emperor was grievously wounded, entombed within the Golden Throne. The angel was gone, his sacrifice a wound that would never fully heal. The blood angels gathered in silence. Azkaelon stood at the center of the hall, the shrouded form of his Primarch laid upon a slab of marble. The great white wings, so often spread in defiance, were folded now in stillness. The golden armor was rent and blackened, but even in death, Sanguinius's face was serene. Around him, the blood angels bowed their heads. None spoke. And outside, the skies cleared. The fires on the horizon dimmed, revealing the battered walls of the palace, the shattered plains, and the bodies of the fallen. The age of the Imperium had survived its greatest trial, but it was no longer the same. Azkaelon placed a hand on the hilt of his sword, his voice low, meant only for the angel before him. "We held the gate, my lord. We held as you asked, and you," his voice faltered, "you held against Horus himself." He stepped back, and the blood angels closed the shroud over their Primarch. The days that followed were strange. Victory had been won, yet no celebration came. The defenders moved like shadows through the palace, repairing walls, burying the dead, and speaking in hushed tones of what had been lost. The blood angels took their vigil in silence, guarding the place where their Primarch lay. His name would be remembered forever, but the wound of his loss would never fade. Sanguinius's sacrifice became a legend whispered across the Imperium. On 1,000 worlds, his name was spoken in reverence. On 1,000 battlefields, the memory of his white wings and golden sword became a rallying cry. But on Terra, in the quiet halls of the palace, the truth was held close, that even angels can fall, and their loss can leave the sky dimmer. At last, the halls of mourning grew still. The walls of the palace bore the scars of the siege, but they stood. The golden throne burned with eternal light, the emperor seated upon it, and the angel's memory remained, not as a wound, but as a promise. In the years to come, the blood angels would carry that promise into battle. They would fight with the same fire, the same grace, the same unshakable resolve. Every strike of their blade would echo the day their Primarch stood at the gate, and always, above them, the memory of his wings would cast a shadow of hope. The galaxy would never forget. The siege of Terra would pass into legend. The heresy would become a story told in hushed voices. But the angel of blood would remain, his rise, his ruin, and his sacrifice forever a part of the Imperium's soul. And in the quiet places of the palace, the walls would remember the sound of his wings,